So here was my question. If you have done everything correctly, and again, if you didn't manage to find that, go back to the video, or if you really cannot find the answer, just ask the people in your tutorial or your practical, but this is the correct answer. Consumer surplus before is 1250, after it's 800. Producer surplus 1250 and 1600, which gives you a deadweight loss of 100. Good. That brings us to the next topic, which is taxes. So we looked at price restrictions, we looked at quantity restrictions. There's another thing that governments can do, which is to impose taxes, right? And they could also impose taxes on these kind of simple markets. And an interesting question would be, what is the effect of that? Okay, sometimes there are market failures, for example, external effects, as we call them, things that are polluting. For example, if you would tax those, then you will have less pollution, right? So that will be a good thing. However, without market failures that are to be corrected, taxes will distort market outcomes, as I will show you in a sec. So here's an example. Suppose that the city of Groningen would consider a 50-cent tax on movie tickets. Question, how would this affect the market for movie tickets? Okay, let's put some more structure on the problem. Suppose that this is demand for movie tickets, this is supply. So that's a very simple, straightforward market again. Here's the equilibrium. Consumer surplus A plus B plus C, the area below demand, above price. Producer surplus D plus E plus F, the area below price, above supply. What happens with a tax? Well, suppose that the suppliers or the movie theaters, they have to pay the tax. Suppose that they have to give to the municipality 50 cents for every movie ticket that they sell. Okay, let's now think very hard about how that would affect this market. Okay, note that in the original situation, at a price of 7.80, for example, movie theaters are willing to provide 3.4 times 100,000, 340,000 movie tickets. But now suppose that they have to pay 50 cents tax per ticket. So in order to still induce them to provide the same amount of tickets, we now have to make sure that they do not get 7.80 for each ticket, but we have to make sure that they get 8.30. Because remember, they have to give 50 cents to the government. So in that case, if they now get 8.30, they would be just as well off as they would before, right? The net price that they end up receiving will be 7.80 again. And that holds for every point on the supply curve, right? So in other words, if movie theaters have to pay 50 cents tax per ticket, then their supply function will simply shift up by those 50 cents because they will take that into account in determining which quantity to set. They are going to think, well, okay, that's nice. We get more money, but we have to pay 50 cents back. So we want to end up at the same place where we were before. And that simply implies that we're going to have to shift up the supply curve by 50 cents. Okay, so what will be the new equilibrium? That will be here, right? At Y. What will be the new consumer surplus? Well, below demand, above price, so that will be area A. What will be the new producer surplus? Well, remember that net, actually, this is the market price, but movie theaters have to pay 50 cents to municipality, so that means that they only end up receiving 7.80, right? So this is what they receive. This is the price that consumers pay, but this is the price that producers receive. So in other words, producer surplus will be exactly this area F. Okay, but to look at welfare, we now also have to include government revenue, right? Government raises 50 cents on every unit, and in equilibrium, 3.4 times 100,000 units will be traded. So what will be government revenue? There will be 50 cents, exactly this amount, multiplied by total quantity, which is this amount. So that gives you exactly this rectangle, right? This rectangle, tax rate multiplied by number of units sold, that will be government revenue. So that's area B plus D, as you can also see here. So what is the deadweight loss? The deadweight loss in this case is C plus E. Total welfare used to be this whole big triangle. Now it's only this area. So again, due to the tax, even though we do take into account that the government can do nice stuff with that as well, there will still be a deadweight loss of the small triangle over there. Another interesting question. What is very interesting in this example is, as you can see, before the tax was imposed, the equilibrium price of movie tickets was $8. After the tax, it was $8.30. So prices go up, by 30 cents. But that's interesting since the tax was 50 cents, right? So in other words, the moviegoers end up paying 30 cents of the tax, and the producers end up paying the remaining 20 cents, right? So that's what we call tax incidence. Who ends up paying for the tax? In this case, 60% by the moviegoers, 40% by the movie theater. And the interesting thing is what you can show. We assumed here that the movie theaters pay the tax, but if we would have assumed that the moviegoers pay the tax, we would have ended up at the exact same situation. In that case, rather than the supply curve shifting up, we would have had the demand function shifting down, because rather than paying $10, for example, the choke price of $10, the choke price will now go down to $9.50, because people will figure out, well, if I pay $9.50 for a movie ticket, then I also have to add a tax, so I will end up paying $10, and that's exactly what I am willing to pay. So that's exactly the choke price. So note that what we assume then is that this is the price before taxes, right? So that's good to keep in mind which price you're exactly looking at. But if you do everything correctly, and it will also be in tutorials, practicals, then you will see you end up with the same outcome. This is another example of tax incidence, how exactly that works. Let me skip that because I've already explained it. Okay. Actually, you can use those elasticities also to determine the share borne by consumers and by producers. Please don't memorize this equation. We don't want you to be monkeys and remember useless formulas. We want you to understand what's going on. So if you understood the explanation I just gave, then you're just fine. But what is interesting to see from these things is that, again, also tax incidence will be affected very much by how flat or how steep those curves are, right? Here, consumers end up paying much more than in this case. Which brings us to another quiz. The question now being, suppose the demand is given again, same example that I had before. What will be the deadweight loss of a tax of 10 per unit raised on consumers? And what is the incidence of that tax? So that was my quiz quiz question in the previous video. If you do it correctly, you should be able to find these answers. And again, please ask your tutorial or practical teachers. This one is obviously a bit more involved than the previous ones, but I already explained to you how to do it, right? Which brings us to subsidies. So actually, subsidies are not that hard to analyze because it's the exact opposite of a tax, right? Rather than paying something extra, you receive something extra if you sell something. So we can also do that in these types of pictures. So now, if the producer gets the subsidy rather than the supply curve shifting to the left, it will now shift to the right, right? So again, before the subsidy, A plus B plus C is our welfare, a consumer surplus, F plus G plus J is our producer surplus, exactly the same as before. But because of the subsidy, some things are going to change. This will be the new market outcome. Prices will be lower since suppliers are eager to produce more. So the producer surplus after the subsidy will be F plus, and will be this whole area. Sorry, yeah, it is. You can also see it here at F plus G plus J plus B plus C plus D. So that's actually that whole area. You can also figure out what consumer surplus is after. So that's just this whole triangle. And there's a cost to government, which is this amount here. So that's simply this rectangle, similar to before. And there's a deadweight lost, which will be this area. And again, I leave it to you to figure out the details here, because otherwise it will become too repetitive. Okay. That's all you need to know about chapter 3. So we did supply and demand in more details. What we're going to do next week, chapter 4, is to look at demand in more detail. We're going to look at consumer behavior. How do consumers decide what to buy? But that's for next week.
This is the first day of my life. Swear I was born right in the doorway. I went out in the rain, suddenly everything changed. They're spreading blankets on the beach. Yours is the first face that I saw. I think I was blind before I met you. And I don't know where I am, I don't know where I've been, but I know where I want to go. And so I thought I'd let you know. Yeah, these things take forever, I especially am slow. But I realized that I need you, and I wondered if I could come home. Remember the time you drove all night just to meet me in the morning? And I thought it was strange, you said everything changed. You felt as if you just woke up. And you said, this is the first day of my life. I'm glad I didn't die before I met you. But now I don't care, I could go anywhere with you, and I'd probably be happy. So if you wanna be with me, if these things there's no telling, we just have to wait and see. But I'd rather be working for a paycheck than waiting to win the lottery.